that of course is not the only reason that I've made this video. I didn't just make it to tell you I still have a face.
In 2012, the world discovered a voice that would stop time. A shy, overweight 17-year-old boy named Jonathan Antoine stepped onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent and, in a moment that no one expected, delivered a performance that sent shockwaves around the globe. But what millions saw that night was only the surface of a much deeper, far more complex story. One marked by relentless bullying, misdiagnosed emotional trauma, and an incredible, almost mystical musical gift that would come to define not just his talent, but his entire identity. Born January 13th, 1995, in Chigwell, Essex, Jonathan grew up in a place that appeared peaceful and privileged. But from an early age, he experienced intense alienation. By age 4, he was already targeted by schoolmates for his weight. Kids hurled food at him during lunch and mocked him to the point that teachers would often find him crying alone in school corridors. His world, internally, became a mix of loneliness and melody. Jonathan would hum to himself in silence, composing complex songs entirely in his head just to soothe his anxiety. By the time he was 6, it was clear he had perfect pitch, a trait that occurs in fewer than 1 in 10,000 people, and could replicate entire operas after hearing them once. He also had a photographic memory for music, and would later be identified as having musical savant syndrome, a rare condition affecting fewer than 1 in 1,000 people, giving him heightened auditory recall and complex internal musical processing. But instead of being embraced, he was misunderstood, labeled awkward, shy, emotional. His struggle with weight deepened, especially as food became his only reliable comfort. By age 5, he was already 40 pounds overweight. By age 6, he weighed 95 pounds. At 10, that number had ballooned to 154 pounds. His mother, Julie, desperate to help him, mortgaged their house twice to pay for therapy, nutritional help, and counseling, but none of it truly worked. Years later, doctors would explain that Jonathan suffered from trauma-induced hyperphagia, a rare condition seen in around 2% of severely bullied children, where emotional trauma leads to uncontrollable eating as a psychological defense. But everything began to shift when, by pure accident, a substitute teacher named Mrs. Williams held a school choir rehearsal, and Jonathan, trying to hide behind other students, was asked to sing. When he opened his mouth, his classmates and the teacher alike were frozen. His voice, a soaring tenor filled with natural vibrato and resonant power, didn't sound like it came from a child. Mrs. Williams later described it as Pavarotti trapped in the body of a child, and recordings showed he could hit frequencies far outside the normal range for his age group, sustaining notes at 95 decibels, enough to fill a full-size concert hall without amplification. From that point on, his life took a sharp turn. He was invited to perform at local music festivals and stun judges at the Stratford and East London Music Festival, where he sang Nessun Dorma against 47 other classically trained vocalists. Though he was just 15 and weighed nearly 300 pounds, the standing ovation he received lasted over 4 minutes, and he was awarded the highest score in the festival's history, 98 out of 100. His prize included a recording offer, but the real reward was that, for the first time, he felt cheered instead of ridiculed. That same year, he was accepted into the Royal Academy of Music's elite junior program, beating out over 2,800 applicants to be one of only 23 selected. His audition was described as nearly perfect, despite the fact he had vomited twice from nerves just minutes before performing. The school, which typically charged over £8,000 per year, waived his fee entirely after learning of his family's financial struggles. His weekends were now filled with intense training, 6 hours of vocal technique, 4 hours of theory, and 2 hours of performance coaching. At first, other students ignored him because of his appearance, but within 3 months, he was cast in the lead role of the Magic Flute, making him the youngest person in the Academy's long history to land a lead role. In 2011, fate intervened again when his music teacher, Jenny Ewington, decided to pair him with Charlotte Giaconelli, a confident 16-year-old with years of musical theater experience. Their first duet, The Prayer, stunned everyone in the classroom. Jonathan's operatic tenor and Charlotte's soaring soprano blended with such chemistry that a local music producer described it as a vocal pairing that happens once in a generation. Yet behind the harmony were frequent panic attacks. Jonathan sometimes locked himself in the school bathroom, overwhelmed by anxiety. Charlotte would often find him, calm him down, and coax him back to rehearsal. Between February and April 2012, they performed at 23 venues, churches, pubs, weddings, and began earning £300 per performance. Charlotte eventually convinced Jonathan to audition for Britain's Got Talent, but he refused repeatedly, terrified of being mocked on national television. She persisted for 3 weeks and, with just 13 minutes left before the submission deadline, uploaded their video audition, filmed in her bedroom. The producers were only interested in Charlotte at first, but she insisted it was both or neither. Their audition was set for April 28th at the London Palladium. Charlotte stayed at Jonathan's house the night before to ensure he didn't back out. When he walked onto that stage, everything changed. Simon Cowell, not knowing who he was, cruelly muttered to a fellow judge, "Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse," referencing Jonathan's appearance. That moment would become one of the most infamous clips in BGT history. But when Jonathan sang, the entire venue transformed. People cried. The judges were stunned. Cowell's jaw dropped. All 4 judges gave an emphatic yes, and Cowell later compared him to Pavarotti. Their performance went viral overnight. Within weeks, it had 2.6 million views and would eventually become the most watched TV audition of the year. But as fame surged, so did scrutiny. Jonathan's past came rushing back. At 280 pounds, he was already a target for tabloids and online bullies. His mother revealed that before BGT, he would hide under oversized jumpers and refuse to leave the house. Now, he was front-page news. During the semifinals, he suffered near debilitating anxiety, requiring breathing exercises just to stay calm. Despite all odds, he and Charlotte reached the finals, only to lose to a dancing dog act named Pudsey. While fans were heartbroken, Cowell moved fast, signing them to an £11 million record deal the next day. Their debut album together hit the UK top 10, selling over 250,000 copies. A second album, Perhaps Love, followed and reached number 1, 5 on the charts. But creative tensions began to build. Jonathan was drawn to traditional opera. Charlotte leaned toward modern musical theater. By early 2014, they split. Sony offered them both solo deals, rare in the industry. Charlotte released Solitaire, then quickly transitioned into professional theater. Jonathan hesitated. Without Charlotte, he lacked the stage confidence she once gave him. He took a year to regroup. In October 2014, he released Tenore, a classical album that topped the UK classical chart and hit number 1, 13 on the pop chart, making him the youngest tenor to achieve that feat. He performed as a guest of Placido Domingo and headlined PBS specials. In 2020, he released Going the Distance, a 3-act concept album with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, produced by Grammy winner Greg Field, capping it with a televised concert special. But behind the spotlight, something deeper remained unresolved. In 2023, after years of emotional confusion and exhaustion, Jonathan was diagnosed with autism. The news arrived just after his 27th birthday, and in a tearful interview in Australia, he admitted it explained everything: the overstimulation, the breakdowns, the years of feeling different. It wasn't shameful, it was liberating. On World Autism Awareness Day, he posted on Instagram describing how the diagnosis reframed his life. He began advocating for mental health and neurodiversity, joining Classic FM's Make Some Noise campaign, and speaking publicly for the first time about what it feels like to be an autistic artist in the spotlight. At the same time, he addressed his physical health. After years of failed diets, he was finally diagnosed with a thyroid condition that had sabotaged previous weight loss attempts. Once managed, he lost over 70 pounds and committed to walking 10,000 steps a day, only missing 2 days since he began. He said the routine gave him structure and a sense of power. Around this time, he also found love, meeting Canadian waitress Michelle Doucet through a web chat service. She became his anchor, muse, and emotional lifeline. Their relationship became public in 2016, and she inspired his album, Belief. Meanwhile, his friendship with Charlotte faded, and by 2017, they barely spoke. Life had simply moved on. Yet Jonathan's story is far from over. A documentary titled Beyond the High Sea is in development, aiming to capture the full arc of his journey, from a bullied, anxious child to one of the most powerful classical voices of his generation. With over 64 million YouTube views, multiple number one classical albums, and a net worth of $4 million, Jonathan Antoine's story is no longer just about talent. It's about transformation, survival, and the strength to finally speak one's truth after 28 years of silence.